All right, welcome back to MDawg. Just a quick little video here. There was a patch today. Let me make sure I'm right on the date. 12/29. I don't know. It's 12/28 in real life. I'm not sure why the patch notes say 12/29. Anyway, I wanted to just quickly talk about the patch notes. I mean, there's not a lot that's too significant, but there's one thing that very much caught my eye, and I've done a little investigation. I wanted to sort of share what I've discovered. At least there may be more information coming, but this is like, you know, my initial discovery of some information. So first of all, you can see the other stuff. There's some fixes here with physics, character movement, anchor control. Some experimental physics of soft baits is temporarily disabled until they figured out what errors were happening. Leg movements for the in-game character has been expanded. Here's the really important one, so let me come back to that. Balancing of Bleak with an increased value. Now, if you're low level, I think Bleak were already an amazing fish to target. You hit some dace mixed in some spots. Bleak are now increased in value, so I'm going to work on a leveling guide episode later, and we've just been going through the very early challenges on that. If it allows us to do a little bit of bleak fishing, be curious to see kind of how noticeable that is. Balancing of Cory whitefish with an increase in value and experience. That's big for leveling players. There's a good spot you can actually justify targeting them, perhaps, especially if you're really into float fishing. And balancing of burbot on Old Berg with an increased value and experience. I'm so fascinated to see, like, does this even have any kind of impact in the game? All right, here's the big deal. A new variant mechanism has been added to the game to modify the gear ratio of the Trident California 40 reel. Now, when I read this, I thought this meant, I was wrong, just as a heads up, but I thought this meant that the California 40, which is a reel that is for sale in the fair, which I'll show you in a second, now had a variable gear ratio. So you could switch between gear ratios, which with the big, expensive, in-game Norway ocean reels, this is an important feature. You're switching between the higher gear ratio so that you can reel in the smaller fish more quickly, and then you're able to gear down to a lower gear ratio so that when you have a big fish on, you can still move the line even more slowly, but still moving it, where if on the higher gear ratio the mech tends to slip. So having that variable gear ratio was really one of the things that held the California reel back from being an easy recommendation for a sort of what I want to say, a budget-friendly in-game ocean reel. So let's take a look really quick. First of all, Tackle Store, just as a reminder, California reel costs 40,000 silver, basically. 60% off, 70 gold. That is awfully good. Now, it still is only showing one gear ratio. So I immediately realized, like, okay, this is not what I thought it was. And I even tested it. I tested it by putting it on this rod and reel. Sorry, this rod I put on the California reel. So I purchased it with silver, put it on the rod, and I cast it out, but not into the water, just right in front of me. And I can show you what I did, except I'm not going to chance it again with that reel. So let's pretend like this is that California reel. What I did was like this. Because you can't switch your gear ratio on your reel unless the line is cast out. So then I hit Control Space, and on this reel, as you see, I'm able to switch gear ratios back and forth. Higher gear, smaller fish, lower gear, bigger fish. But when I tried this experiment with the California 40, sure enough, just as it says in the description, it is still only a gear ratio of 2.4 to 1 rotation. Okay, so that's a slow gear ratio. You don't mind it on the big fish, but on the small fish, it's kind of miserable. So when I read the the patch note, I thought we were getting a Christmas present here with this change to the California reel. Now, it's a little more complicated than that, okay? We go to the workshop and we go to reels. If you look at just about any other reel, I'm trying to even think off the top of my head if there's an exception to this. I just don't remember there being mech replacements on reels. Well, this is what they've done. They've added to the California 40 a variant TRD California high gear ratio. So, what does that mean? I'm not actually sure because I'm not going to spend this money to find out. Quality mechanism prolongs the service life and increases the reliability of the reel. By changing the mech, you can change the gear ratio of the reel. A high gear ratio makes the reel faster, and a low gear ratio makes the reel have more force when reeled. So this is my question. Some of you all may know the answer to this. If I installed the variant TRD California high gear kit for $24,500 silver, does it completely turn it into a 4.5 to gear ratio to one rotation? Or does it install it so that we can then switch between 2.4 to 1 and 4.5 to 1? I'm just curious, and I don't know the answer. You know, if I take another reel in here, I can't even, there is no replacement, so I can't get to that. I can't get to that page to do the comparison, but if I pull up the exclamation point here, it does show both gear ratios, right? So, best case scenario is if you change it, it goes and becomes a double gear ratio, but I don't think that's the way I read it. I think it's also possible that by putting this on, you're just creating a higher, faster gear ratio. But remember, you're also spending $24,500 more silver. So let me show you why this is important. If I go to the Tilted Jock spreadsheet and I go down to California 40, if the California 40 had a variable gear ratio, let's say it was 4 to 1, and then on the high end it was 4 something to 1, then it really would be competing well and probably beating, maybe even destroying, the current budget-friendly in-game reel. So a lot of people consider this, the Taiga LTD C40-2S. Some people would argue the Tonger 30 is worth considering, but let's just go with the Taiga LTD C40-2S. It's got a rated drag of 24.5, so that's already almost 2 lower than the California. So in other words, the California 40 is a little bit stronger just on its rated drag. The mech weight, the California 40 has a heavier mech weight, so it's stronger, more durable. The line length, the California 40 has more spool. So in all of the ways, it's actually a much better option. Now the test is it's got a higher test, which means there's some situations that it's less flexible. But for using it in the ocean, that just really doesn't hardly ever matter. It really doesn't. But what does matter is this gear ratio. You have to remember, so right now the price is almost the same. We're getting the California 40 for under 40K. We're getting the Taiga C40 for under 43K. So it's about a 3,000 silver difference. And on paper, the California 40 is a better reel if it has the double gear ratio. With just a single gear ratio, it's up for debate. And I would probably lean, though I've not used either one of these reels. Again, that's why I keep saying on paper, I would lean towards the Taiga LTD C40 because of the change in gear ratio. Being able to gear down to that 1.8 to 1 rotation is so nice. And even though 4.3 is not a super fast one, it's much better than 2.4 to 1 rotation. So upgrading the California 40. Even best case scenario, if it's going to cost us 25,000 more silver, that puts us all the way up to 65,000. And for that, you can go get the Triumph 32S, for example, which has got gear ratio 2. It's got a much higher rated drag. The mech weight is off the chart. And that's not even one that people realistically consider to go, because at that point you would just save up for the Borealica 40DS probably. It's got a bigger price tag, but I'm just saying, adding 25,000 silver in the workshop to upgrade this sucker, even best case scenario, if it did turn it into a double gear ratio, which I don't know that it will. I think it might just increase the gear ratio. 5-star, it's nice, but it's costing you 25,000 extra silver. So unfortunately for me, that means that we are returning the California 40. It's not as tempting as it first looked like it was when I read the patch notes. So I'm glad I didn't rush out and use it without studying it a little bit. The rest of the patch notes, like I said, bunch of fixes, and there's some interesting things with rebalancing fish, but this was the one that really struck my fancy. I wanted to see, like, wait, what does this mean? What can we do with this California 40? I really wanted it to all of a sudden make it this amazing, you know, deal on a budget-friendly in-game ocean reel. Because then we could just recommend it to everybody, kind of like we do the Regal as like the budget-friendly entry point to the ocean. Not in-game point, but entry point. So anyway, that's my take on it. Please let me know if I'm missing something. I'm being a little bit cautious here in how strong I'm saying these things, because I might be missing something, and I also did not test any of this. I'm sort of relying upon what the game seems to be telling me, and what I'm reading about some of these stats and these reels that I haven't used in some of these spreadsheets that we have online. So please let me know in the comments what you think as you sort of have studied this, if you have, or as you've looking over the information that I've gone over. What's exciting you about these patch notes? I'm curious. I'm glad they're getting some fixes in. This does not surprise you after a pretty significant patch like they had to start the holidays off. So we'll see how it goes from here. But at least for me, I'm still pausing on the California 40 until I know more. Maybe y'all can talk me back into it. All right, I will see you soon. Tight lines, everybody.